One beautiful summer afternoon, my husband and I took a day trip to a state forest preserve in Illinois. This preserve has a series of winding forest trails perfect for hiking. We spent several hours wandering around, taking in the scenery, and enjoying the sounds and smells of the forest. At some point, my husband said he wanted to head back to the nature center to get some coffee, but I wasn't ready to stop hiking just yet. I told him to go on ahead, that I would meet up with him later. I continued my now lone hike until right about sundown, when I decided it was finally time to head back. But as I started down the trail towards the nature center, the temperature suddenly dropped. And everything I'd been hearing in the summer woods, tree frogs, birds, crickets, the hum of bees, the faraway yipping of coyotes, suddenly went silent. It was an eerie kind of silence, like I'd walked into some kind of sound dampening bubble. Yet it wasn't my hearing. I could still hear myself, my own footfalls on the ground. I stopped and looked around. That's when I noticed a grove of old oak and hazel and hawthorn trees on the other side of this gorge that bordered the path I was standing on the left-hand side. There, in the grove of trees, I saw someone watching me. A man. My first thought was that it was my husband. The man looked just like him, tall, broad-shouldered, with shaggy, pale blonde hair. But he was wearing different clothes than my husband had been wearing that day. In fact, I found this man's clothing odd-looking altogether, which is part of the reason I didn't immediately try to find a way around the gorge to meet up with him, thinking he was my husband. The man, or whatever he was wearing a strange fitted jacket of dark green material and fitted trousers of some light tan-colored material. It might have been leather. It looked shiny. The trousers were tucked into knee-high boots that matched nothing my husband owned. This man was looking at me with no particular expression on his face. The distance across the gorge that separated us was maybe 50 feet, so I could see him quite well. But the more I looked at him, the less like my husband he appeared. He was beautiful. It's the only word I can come up with to describe him. He wasn't my husband, and yet I was drawn to him as if he was. I couldn't take my eyes off him. And then suddenly he was gone. He just vanished. He didn't step behind a tree or jump down the gorge. He just wasn't there anymore. A few seconds later, the creatures in the forest started making their sounds again. After that, I went back to the nature center rather faster than I had been moving before. I didn't feel afraid exactly, but I had this strong sense that I shouldn't linger, that if I persisted in staying, I might see things that I wasn't supposed to see, and that would be rude somehow. By the time I got back to the parking lot and our car, it was almost full dark. My husband was waiting there for me, wearing the same thing he'd had on all day. I decided not to ask him if he'd been messing about in the woods in a different outfit, because I was pretty sure I'd get an odd look from him if I did. And on some level, I knew that telling him what I saw would cause problems between us. So I never told him. But problems arose anyway. We ended up divorcing 3 years later. Not because of the man in the woods, obviously. Or maybe not so obviously. The truth is, I still think about that man, or whatever he was, all the time. I wish I could see him again. He was very beautiful. I believe I had an encounter with the fairy known as the Gancanagh. That is, if encounters with fairies can happen in dreams. This is a recurring dream that I started to have about a week ago. Recurring dreams are always a bit disturbing, but this one in particular has left an impression on me. A feeling that the dream is following me around somehow in my waking life. I just can't shake it. The images or feelings that this dream stirred in me, I can't shake him. The dream starts with me in a field full of wildflowers. It's night, and I'm staring up at a starry sky. Someone is walking towards me. It's a man, a gorgeous man, and he's smiling at me. He's tall, like 6'3" or so, with black hair and bright blue eyes. His features are so... I don't know, I guess I'd go with the word enchanting. And I immediately feel captivated by him. He holds out his hand to me, beckoning for me to go with him. And I have the sense that he's making me an offer. It's like he's offering me a whole world. A world so beautiful, I'll never want to leave it. Or him. I can't resist the temptation. I give him my hand, even though part of me says this man is a stranger. You don't know him. You can't trust him. But I put that part of me aside. As soon as my fingers touch his, I'm instantly on my feet. And we are running in the field, then through a forest. It's a thrilling sensation. It almost feels like I'm flying. We slow down after what feels like a few minutes and are now walking along a beach with white sand. I suddenly realize it's daytime, maybe 1 to 2 in the afternoon, and I wonder how this can be, since it was night only a few minutes ago. It occurs to me that maybe we were running for much longer than I had realized. At the same time, I look over at him and realize he has no shadow. I can see my shadow stretched out on the sand, but there's no shadow around him at all. It's eerie, and I start to feel frightened. So I ask him about it. He just shakes his head and then says, "Can you give me your name?" I'm confused because people usually say, "Can you tell me your name?" Never give. So I say, "No, I will not give you my name. I can tell you it, but not give it to you." And then I tell him my nickname. He seems to be okay with that, smiles and leans down to kiss me. And this is when I usually wake up. I know this dream might not seem particularly disturbing to most people, more like a romantic adventure. And yet, I feel extremely disturbed by it. I get this involuntary feeling of terror every time I think of it. Like it's the beginning of something. Something I won't be able to control. I don't know if I'm letting my imagination get the better of me or if there is something real going on. But I just hope that whatever keeps happening in my dreams doesn't bleed into my waking life in a way that's more solid than scattered images and feelings. This encounter happened in the summer of 2010 in California. My girlfriend and I were sitting by a beautiful stream in a forested park about 2 miles from the Pacific Ocean. We'd gotten to our spot by crossing a bridge that was just 50 feet away from us, as the stream was somewhat large. Across from us in the stream was a dense wood, where there was also a wide dirt path by which we had hiked into the area. The trail actually runs for about 20 miles all the way into a nearby redwood forest town. My girlfriend was a clairsentient person, 46 years old, like me at the time, and had had psychic experiences since her youth. As we sat there, she told me that she could sense a presence and pointed towards the woods far to our left. I looked in that direction, but I didn't see anything there. We got to talking, and the topic of the fairies came up. She then told me that she'd encountered the fae at various times throughout her life. After maybe 15 minutes of talking about that and maybe another 20 minutes of silence, my girlfriend once again pointed across the stream and a bit to the left at the woods and said, "There's something there." And this time, I saw something. What appeared to be a person was moving from between the trees and onto the trail. He was still at least 500 feet away, but walking rapidly and sometimes skipping down the path, which was entirely visible to us from across the water. This being walked and skipped, and the closer he moved to us, the more he began to look like a young man, and yet not a man. There was something strange about the way he moved, the way he looked, everything about him. Eventually, he turned and saw us watching him, and he immediately changed his course and came straight towards us, walking, skipping off the path, over the bridge, and was soon standing right in front of us. He appeared to be about 19 to 21 years old, naked except for a pair of leather Celtic or pagan shorts, or maybe more like a loincloth, like you'd see at the Renaissance fair, and a leather vest of similar style that was fully open. His feet were bare. He exuded a vibrant, healthy quality. His body was completely tanned, but Caucasian, with natural definition, as if he'd never worked out but was quite healthy from living in the outdoors all the time. My girlfriend and I were seated on the ground. He was standing above us, so he appeared to be about 5'7" or so from where we were seated, maybe 160 to 165 pounds. As I was looking right up at him and he was looking down at us, I seemed to notice that his ears appeared mildly pointed on top. He had thick, dark, wavy hair that went past his ears, but not past his neck. And his eyes were intensely sparkly. And he was smiling. His features were animated. And he also seemed to shift his weight slightly between his legs as he proceeded to speak, without a foreign accent, I think. He said he was lost and asked if we could help him find his way. I tried to be helpful. I said there was only a single path into and out of this area, and it was the one he'd been on. If he followed it another 2 miles, he'd be at the beach and the parking lot for the western entrance of the park. Unless he parked near the east entrance, in which case it would be around 17 miles to the parking area on the east side. He thanked me and said he wasn't sure how he'd gotten lost, but could he hang out there with us? He looked at us with his sparkly eyes, and I have to admit, he was very handsome. He had a charming smile and seemed harmless enough. I was about to say yes, but something stopped me. There was something unsettling about him, and vaguely repulsive even, and I had a strong sense that he wasn't what he appeared to be. My girlfriend and I looked at each other, and then I said, "No, I think we just want to enjoy each other's company alone." But this didn't convince him. He stepped closer to us and said, "Did you bring a tent? maybe I could camp with you and find my way in the morning. Now I was starting to get really uncomfortable. I said, thanks, but my girlfriend and I just want to be alone. After a brief pause, he nodded once and wished us a good day. Then he turned away from us and began to skip in his way, across the small bridge, then all the way to the path, about another 80 feet. And then he made a right turn on the path and skipped rapidly out of sight. My girlfriend and I were both stunned and silent for a few minutes. And then she said, "Did you see how he moved? He was one of the fairies. Only fairies move like that." I replied that I thought fairies couldn't be in physical form like humans. But she said no, there are many different forms and types, and that they could appear in most any form they pleased. It was a bizarre experience, to say the least. We talked about him for a little while. Besides his robust outdoor healthy energy and tanned and ruddy complexion, we agreed about how handsome he was, strikingly so, and simultaneously about the unsettling and vaguely repulsive energy he exuded. My girlfriend said not everyone would have picked up on the unsettling energy, and that some people who are less tuned in might have agreed to his request. I'm glad we didn't, because who knows what might have happened. Why do I think this being was a fairy? Well, apart from my girlfriend's intuition, there was my sense that he wasn't as he appeared, almost though he was under a glamour of some kind. Then there was the repulsiveness, the strange, crooked skipping, his clothing and mostly nakedness, and his ears. This experience influenced my later life in some big ways I won't get into now. As strange as it was, I have to say, I'm glad it happened. After I had my encounter, I never once spoke of it. This will be the first time I've shared my experience with anyone. I've done a lot of research, scoured the internet for different resources, and this channel seems to be the only one where I found stories of experiences similar to my own. So I hope if you do narrate my story, that people in the comments will help me identify what it is I ran into. Here is what happened. I was walking through the forest on a game trail with my dog. I'm used to seeing wildlife of all kinds on my walks, and my dog also enjoys the sight of wild animals, though she doesn't chase or bark at them, just walks beside me and watches. On this particular day, we went deeper into the woods than ever before. We passed over a boulder field that had formed from rocks falling off an overhanging granite cliff. As we came to the end of it, we found a small field in the shape of a circle. The grass in this field was short, almost as if someone cut and cleaned it weekly. But who would groom a random field this deep in the woods? I thought it was strange, but didn't feel overly concerned or disturbed by it. I decided to take a break. My dog and I stopped close to the middle of the field and sat down. I got out a water bottle and bowl and poured my dog a drink, and then relaxed in the cool grass. We'd been sitting there for around 10 minutes when 2 does walked out of the forest edge on one side of the field. One of the does spotted me and my dog and turned quickly away and disappeared back into the forest. But the second deer held its ground. She looked at me only, not once did she look at the dog, even though the dog was closer to her than I was. The doe then walked along the edge of the field, eyes still locked on me. As she walked, she wove in and out of the forest. There was something funny about this, and I laughed. And the doe pinned her ears back at the sound of my laughter and started bobbing her head up and down. I got to my feet slowly, thinking to myself, I wonder how close this deer will let me get before running away. I moved towards her slowly, and as I neared her, she walked in almost a prance back into the woods. I followed her until I was about 5 feet into the forest, but I quickly lost track of the deer amongst all the trees and thick brush. I spotted some movement in the undergrowth, but instead of the doe stepping out from behind some trees as I had expected, a girl with very long black hair stepped into view. She appeared to be mostly naked, though her hair was very long and thick and cascaded down around her body in such a way that it covered her almost like clothing, so it's possible she was wearing something small. I tried not to stare, but I was in a shocked, confused state. She was the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, and just stood there, staring at me with these ice blue eyes. I don't know how long we stared at each other, but soon she moved very slowly and began to gesture for me to come closer. I took 2 steps towards her, almost involuntarily, but then stopped and said, "Are you okay, miss? Do you need help?" She didn't reply. Instead, she tilted her head and then held out her hand again, as if she wanted me to go with her, and her eyes looked to get even more blue. Now, I don't know why I said this, but it just came spilling out. I said, "I'm sorry, I can't come with you. Thank you for offering. You're the most beautiful thing I have ever seen." She lowered her hand, smiled, and nodded her head slightly. Then, for the first time, she took her eyes off me and walked behind a large oak tree. A few minutes later, there was some rustling in the brush, and I saw the doe bounding through the woods. The doe looked at me, twitched her ears a few times, and ran off into the forest with very unusual speed, and no sound that I can remember. I stood there for a few seconds, completely shocked, wondering what had happened to the woman and not really accepting what I had just seen. Feeling blank, I eventually wandered back to the round field in a trance and found my dog there sleeping in the grass. It was only then that I started remembering where I was, why I was there, and even that I had my dog with me. I can't explain the odd blank feeling I had that followed me all the way home. I think maybe I really was in a form of shock. It's one thing to read about stories like this in fairy tales. It's completely different to experience it in real life. To think these stories actually have a basis in reality, it changes your whole concept of what is real. Shock is the only way I can describe what I felt at being confronted with this experience that I could find no rational explanation for. I have not returned to that field and those woods since that day, but I will, once I know more about what it was I encountered out there. If anyone knows, if anyone has any information, please tell me. When I was a kid, I had a neighbor who was my best friend. We were both the same age, and we lived next door to each other from ages 6 to 11 when his family moved away. But we were practically inseparable before then. We used to ride bikes around the neighborhood, climb trees, and just explore. And this was the 80s, so we didn't have any parental supervision on these little adventures. It was a lot of fun. We were like those kids from the Goonies, except there were only two of us. There was this one house in particular, 2 streets away from ours, that we were completely obsessed with. We used to call it the haunted house. Not very original, I know, but what can I say, we were 10. The house really did look like a haunted house, though, right out of a movie. The windows were dingy and always covered in curtains. The roof and lawn were overgrown with ivy and weeds, and there was a giant sign out front that said, "Keep out." I don't know if anyone lived there, but if someone did, we never saw them. We used to ride our bikes past this house and sometimes dare each other to knock on the door. I did it once after my friend, I'll call him Billy, spent all day double dog daring me. I went by myself, crept up the walkway, which I remember had these little white flowers growing between cracked stones, knocked on the door 3 times fast, and then ran like my life depended on it. I found Billy at the end of the lawn, hiding in the bushes. We huddled there and waited, but no one answered the door. Something changed between Billy and me during the months before his family moved away. I came home from school one day and found an envelope taped to the front door. It was full of these colorful plastic bracelets, the kind that were popular back then, and a note from Billy. He wanted me to be his girlfriend. I was kind of confused by this. I was too young and naive to even know what a girlfriend was. We were friends already. What more did he want? I didn't know how to talk to him after that. My brother started making fun of me, singing songs about me and Billy sitting in a tree, Kissing, and I was upset with Billy for making things weird. It wasn't long after that I found out he and his family were moving away to Australia, the other side of the world. It was sad, and we didn't even get to say a proper goodbye because of how awkward things had become, and we didn't stay in touch. I've thought about him occasionally since then and wondered if things might have turned out differently if he hadn't moved away. If eventually, when we were both older, we might have maybe even gotten together when I was actually ready for that, and had one of those fairy tale romances where you start out as childhood friends. But I guess it wasn't meant to be. Years later, when I was in my 20s, something strange happened sort of related to Billy. I was walking past the old haunted house when I noticed for the first time in my life the curtains in one of the top floor windows were open. And for a moment, I thought I saw a guy in the window staring at me. This guy looked a lot like Billy. At least he looked similar to the way I imagined Billy would look as an adult. I only saw him for a few seconds before he stepped back away from view, but I was completely spooked. I went home and asked my mom if she knew what Billy and his family were up to, and she said she didn't know. She had lost touch with them after they moved away, and this was before Facebook, so I couldn't just look him up online. I couldn't stop thinking about him, though. Logically, I knew there was no way that that guy I saw in the window was Billy. But illogically, inexplicably, I felt strongly that it was him. I walked past that house a lot after that, sometimes even pacing back and forth in front of it, hoping to see those curtains open again, hoping that I would see the guy again, clearly this time, and then I would know for sure that it hadn't been Billy, so that way I could just forget about it. But I couldn't forget. As time went on, I became more and more obsessed. I had dreams about going inside that house and finding Billy there waiting for me, smiling, asking what took me so long. These dreams were always very pleasant. The inside of the house wasn't spooky at all in my dreams. It was like an old-fashioned manor house filled with flowers. Because of these dreams, I was tempted to walk up to that house and knock on the front door like I did when I was a kid. But I didn't want to run away this time. I wanted to stand there and wait for someone to answer it. I wanted it to be that guy I had seen in the window. Once I even made it partway up the walkway, which still had these white flowers growing between cracks. But then I stopped myself and had this moment where I realized how irrational I was being. What would I even say if that guy did answer the door? Hi, I saw you in the window and I thought you were my friend. It was ridiculous, but realizing that was like a splash of cold water in my face. I left and tried to put the house and Billy out of my mind. I was mostly successful, and eventually, years later, I did connect with Billy again over the internet and found out that he had never left Australia. He had changed a lot. He didn't look at all what I had imagined he would look like, which was more like the way the guy I saw in the window had looked. After becoming interested in fairies, I thought back to this experience and started to wonder if maybe I had some kind of encounter. It was strange the way I'd become so quickly fixated on the haunted house. How I kept thinking about it and dreaming about going inside. How the guy in the window had looked like how I imagined Billy would look. Almost like glamour was involved. I still wonder what might have happened had I actually knocked on the door and waited for someone to answer. Would that guy in the window have answered the door? Would he have claimed to have been Billy, even though he wasn't, even though he was something else? Would he have invited me in? Or was he just a reclusive guy that lived in that house? And I was imagining everything else. Because I do have an active imagination. I don't have the answers, but I know it should stay that way. Thanks for watching. I have a quick announcement, so don't go away. I now have a website up and running at scaryfairygodmother.com. Link in the description. The website has a spot where you can submit your fairy stories or submit comments, questions, or suggestions. And I also made a new trailer for the channel, which should be public now, and you can also see it on the website. You can also sign up for my mailing list on the website. I'm going to send out occasional sneak peeks of things to the mailing list, like an early chapter of my upcoming novel and that sort of thing. It's going to be very occasional where you receive an email from me. It's free to sign up, so please do. It's a reliable way that I can get in touch with you. Because YouTube's not always the most reliable with notifications, as most of you know. I'm also planning to add a section to the website where I feature other fairy artists, writers, and creators, just to bring some more attention to other people working in this area, which it would be fun to highlight some of those creators, also artists, writers. Doesn't have to be YouTubers, but anyone who is doing kind of fairy related things. I'd love to feature you on the website. So please send me an email or fill out the contact form on my website. I was also thinking of adding a forum to the website in the future where people can post their experiences, share stories and articles, artwork about fairies. So let me know if that's something any of you guys are interested in and you think that you would participate in. And if enough people are interested, then I'll go ahead and add that to the website. So let me know in the comments. Okay, that's it for the announcement. As always, I really want to send special thanks out to all my supporters on Patreon who are helping to keep this content going and helping me do things like build websites and hopefully expand the channel in the future. I really appreciate you guys so much, and the support you are giving this work. Just thank you so much. It means the world to me. You can also support the channel by clicking the join button or by picking up one of the journals that are for sale that I designed. The proceeds obviously were going to go to help support the channel. The stories in this video came courtesy of subscribers and the Fairy Census, so thanks to everyone who submitted. The stories from the census were edited for dramatic and narration reasons, but if you would like to read the originals, the link to the census is in the description. If you've had a fairy experience and would like to share it, please email it to me or submit it on the website. Also, fairy art, fairy fiction, anything related to fairies, really, please send it along. Please leave a comment below. Tell me what you thought of these stories. Do you have a favorite one, or do you have any theories about what sort of fairies were involved in these stories? Let me know in the comments, and also if you have any requests for content that you would like to see in future videos. I'll be in the comments for the next hour or so answering your questions and responding to comments. And if you like this content and would like to support it, definitely check out my Patreon page. The link is in the description. And don't forget to comment below, like, share, and subscribe if you're new, and hit the bell to receive notifications of new videos. And until next time, this has been a visit from your scary fairy godmother.